wanted to welcome everybody back to Buford, PUSSER, The Other Story, and today we're going to be talking about part two of the investigation. Now, before we get to that, I want to introduce you to a member of our page, Perry Carver. Now, Perry happens to be the owner of the Bonnie and Clyde Ambush Museum in Gippsland, Louisiana. Now, that is the town where Bonnie and Clyde spent their last night, had their last meal, and were killed. At any rate, Perry's a lot like me. He likes the real story, not the Hollywood version. And that's the problem that we both have, is you have movie makers, script writers, novelists, all kinds of people who want to fictionalize the story to suit their agenda rather than just tell the entire story. Now listen to this clip as Perry describes how that scriptwriters had Frank Hamer as being the one who tracked Bonnie and Clyde down to Gippsland, and how the credit was given to him unduly. I don't know how else to put it. That's the way movies are done. But listen to Perry describe this.
Our sheriff here and our deputy Bob, Prentice Oakley and Henderson Jordan, they never get the credit they deserve. They did this, not Frank Hamer. I'm sorry, Amy Methvin was related to the sheriff here. She contacted the sheriff to let him know what was going on. And so that's how all this came about. It wasn't that Frank Hamer tracked them down to Louisiana. The Highwaymen's a great movie, but it is all Hollywood. I'm sorry, but a lot of these screen actors and writers, they're screenwriters. They're making up stories. They're not historians. They haven't walked the walk. They haven't talked the talk. They haven't talked to these people. They're just screenwriters. They're making a movie. And I don't know why they don't tell the true story about Bonnie and Clyde. Number one, it'd make your heart go out to them more than what a lot of people probably think they deserve. The 67 movie certainly did romanticize it, but it certainly put Bonnie in the picture a lot more than she actually was.
My point here is that the movie Walking Tall was a fictionalized characterization of Buford Pusser. It was just as phony as a $3 bill, just like the story of Bonnie and Clyde was. At any rate, keep in mind that there are a lot of people out here who see the movies, they take them as documentaries when they're not. When it comes to movies, movie production companies are not really your friend when it comes to telling a true story. Just like with Bonnie and Clyde, Walking Tall was not a true story of Buford Pusser's career as sheriff. Think about this for a minute. Towhead White went to prison in 1965. Louise Hathcock was killed in 1966. The ambush didn't take place until 1967, but the movies had you believing that the State Line Mob was behind Pauline's murder. How could that be? I mean, of course, people will now try to convince you that Towhead White manipulated everything from his prison cell and contracted the ambush out, but there's absolutely no proof of that. The movies just made you believe it. So what I'm trying to tell you again is you have to check things out. These movie companies are not your friend. Don't believe that just because you see it in a movie that is true. At any rate, we'll get past this. Let's go on to the investigation and pick up where we left off last week. After the ambush, Buford is rushed to Baptist Memorial Hospital in Memphis, 92 miles away from Selmer. Once there, he has two visitors. Jim Moffett, Chief Deputy of McNairy County, and Warren Jones of the TBI. Buford would tell the two investigators the story of going down New Hope Road, a dark-colored Cadillac approaching him from behind, without headlights. As they reached the bridge, they opened fire, one shot striking Pauline in the head. He claimed that she was still alive at that point in time. He drove 2 miles on down the road, thought he had lost the ambush party, and stopped again. At this point, they pulled up beside him once more, stopped, opened fire. Buford was hit in the chin, and Pauline was hit in the head a second time, and Buford claimed that that was the shot that killed her. Meanwhile, back in McNairy County, investigators tried to figure out what happened with the ambush. Nothing seems to make a great deal of sense. How did Buford not see the ambush party approaching from behind? Where did they come from? Who were they? So many questions and so few answers. Pauline was now dead, and Buford knew he had a problem. He had to have an alibi. He had to blame somebody for her death. The state line had been shut down for 17 months. Jack Hathcock was dead. He had already killed Louise Hathcock, and Towhead White was in prison. So what could he do? He went back to his old standby, W.O. Hathcock. Investigators at the scene soon learned of word that Buford had been pursued by a dark blue Cadillac. Strangely, this Cadillac matched one that was owned by W.O. Hathcock, or at least had been. Hathcock had sold the car to a Tupelo dealership about 2 weeks prior. One of the troubling aspects of the investigation was the fact that there was almost no place for an ambush party to have hidden. And at the same time, in the darkness, there was almost no way that an ambush party could have followed without their headlights, as PUSSER had claimed. Due to the lack of side roads or driveways in the area, investigators soon determined that about the only place that a car could have hidden was at the New Hope Methodist Church. In the meantime, with so little information to work with, investigators soon made the trek to Tupelo, Mississippi, to examine the car that W.O. Hathcock had once owned. In doing so, they found no signs of rock, gravel, dirt on the undercarriage or tires of the car that would match that of New Hope Road. W.O. Hathcock realized that Buford would probably try to implicate him in the alleged ambush, so he and his wife Larice volunteered to take polygraph examinations, which both passed. This, along with the lack of evidence on the Cadillac that he had once owned, cleared him as a suspect. Several law enforcement officials and investigators who visited the ambush scenes that day didn't find Buford's story about how the ambush had occurred to be plausible. Later in the day, one Alcorn County law enforcement officer was asked if they had suspects, and he said they had one, implying that it was Buford PUSSER. Stories persist that TBI was so concerned about the ambush sites that they went to the residence of Judge Clyde Treese and asked him to accompany them to the ambush sites. He did so, along with his son Hoyt and a friend of Hoyt's. Be sure and hit that subscribe button for notifications of future videos, and be sure and leave your comments at the end of this video. With so little information to go on, the search for suspects soon took the TBI to the McNairy County Jail, where they met with Carl PUSSER, the sheriff's father, who was the dispatcher the night of the disturbance call. The older PUSSER maintained that while he did take the call concerning a disturbance at Hollis Jordan's Beer Tavern on Highway 45, he refused to send either Sheriff PUSSER or a deputy out on the call. Allegedly, when Buford was released from the hospital, the TBI questioned him at length about the disturbance call that he had taken early that morning. Buford insisted that he had taken a call regarding a disturbance while at his reference around 4 a.m. that morning. Neither he nor Carl would deviate from the stories they originally told. Now, a lot of the Pusser fans take the movie Walking Tall as a documentary. They think that Buford's jaw was actually blown away. What they don't realize is that Buford only spent 18 days in the hospital, that his wound was to his chin, not his jaw. He didn't wear a cast like he did in the movie. Another thing a lot of people don't know is that it was one of his girlfriends that picked him up, took him home that day. And on the way home from Memphis, he wanted to have breakfast. What did he order? Hog brains and eggs. Now, that's really quite a meal for a guy who has no jaw. Somehow I find it questionable that Buford could get over his wife's death so quickly and still have his girlfriend pick him up from the hospital to bring him back to Adamsville. This behavior just seems so strange. One of the first things that usually happens in a homicide investigation is that friends and family of the victim are interviewed. There is no indication that that happened. We still don't know if Diane, Mike, Dewana were ever questioned. Helen? But what about Levon Plunk, Ward Moore? And the list goes on. Dennis and Johnny were right there at the ambush scene that morning, and no one took their statements. That's what we're going to get into in the next video when we see part 3. While I have you here, I would like to take an opportunity to ask you to please put your comments at the end of these videos so I have some idea about what you folks are thinking. At the same time, I would also like to appeal to you that if you have any photos that you believe that I have not seen, any information about Buford that you don't believe I have, please contact me. My phone number is on my Facebook page, Buford Pusser, The Other Story, and my email address is out there as well, mikeelam2010 at gmail.com. Now, until next week, just remember, the truth has no agenda.